I want to celebrate. So on that concept last week, less is more, I've heard some really, really cool stories of people embracing the challenge last week to give away 100 things. And so, let's see, I wrote it down. Albert and Jody, he was drumming, by the way, Albert was, and they have like a list of things they were sharing with me that they've been trying to give away. And then Sarah and Patty were already doing this big garage sale, but then like on top of that, it like added gasoline to the fire, and it blew up into this like, get rid of stuff and make some money and make room and it's gonna be awesome. And then Maddie joined and made like what, $45? Money, yeah. And it's so cool. Danielle's been like going through our house and just getting rid of everything, which brings me a lot of joy, to be honest. So it's been super, super cool to see the stories. If you have some, I'd love to hear them of just how some practical things you took last week and are putting them into practice. And so a couple of big things that we've been into in this series are going to be on the screen. Last week was less is more. This week we're talking about stress is bad. Everybody say stress is bad. Would you agree? That is a true statement. Next week we are looking at giving is good. Everybody say giving is good. Yeah, hey, that was pretty good. You actually kind of acted like you believed it. That was good. And then lastly, tomorrow matters. Say tomorrow matters. Awesome. So why are we doing this? Why are we having these conversations? I want you to know, just on the front, City Church exists to help people find their way to God from where they are. That's why we do what we do. It's why we're here. It's the bread and butter. It's the hill to die on. And part of us collectively getting together, growing together, and living on mission is letting God do a work in and through us that results and empowers us to keep loving and living in a way that makes a difference in the world around us. Does that make sense? And so the next 4 weeks, or rather the 4 weeks that we're in, what we're wrestling with are some really practical and maybe a little odd in your mind topics to be talking about when it comes to gathering together in a church, but I think they are leveraging and positioning us to make a bigger difference in and around us. For example, last week we said the reason we're embracing less is more is so we can focus on less of what doesn't matter and more of what does. And so it's not just, let's talk about our finances and let's talk about our time and our energy and our resources and see how we can leverage them better, but it's about leveraging them for a bigger purpose. And so I want you to know, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey today, you are loved, you are welcome, and you are safe here. And we mean that every time, all the time, consistently. And I had someone ask me a couple of weeks ago, so hey, like, where are we going? I know it's our mission, and I know, kind of what we're about, but where are we heading? And I can't answer that fully because I'm not God, and I don't know what he's doing, but I do know some things that he is doing. And so I just want to share these with you so you have some foundational ideas of the big picture as we wrestle with these topics. And so one of the things we're doing is we are intentionally creating a church for people who don't go to church. You need to know that everything that we do is about people who don't go to church. And once you get plugged into the life and community here, it immediately goes from being about you to not being about you. It's a beautiful thing. You get to invited into this family that is outwardly focused and making a difference in our city and around the world. And so we are building a church. We're creating a church for people who don't go to church. We're creating community for people who don't have community. And lastly, our desire is to develop individuals who love Jesus and love people and are hopping onto God's agenda in the world around them. Does that make sense to you? So at the base, man, that's what we're after. And so why are we going through it in this way? Let's go back to stress is bad. Stress is bad. Everybody say it one more time. Stress is bad. It is bad. It's really bad. And so today, the conversation we're having, I'm going to start by giving you some stats to stress you out, okay? I thought it'd be helpful if I could get you stressed on the front end, then we could really feel this on the back end. And so I got a couple of stats for you up here. Number one is this: 78% of people live paycheck to paycheck in America. Yep, that might make you feel good or worry you, or I don't know where you land on the spectrum, but 78% of the entire United States population live paycheck to paycheck. That's stressful. Second thing, 66% of Americans struggle to pay $1,000 emergency, right? Something happens, break a bone, car explodes, kid throws a rock through your window, your refrigerator goes out. 66% struggle to cover even $1,000 emergency, which we are probably familiar with, right? Next stat, 7 out of 10 couples don't budget consistently, which makes a lot of sense. You're like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. So now to give you some stats that are going to stress you out. You ready? Average consumer debt in America as of the other night when I was on Google is $180,000 for mortgages. How many of you are like, man, I wish I had that in Boulder? I can't even get a mortgage in Boulder because I can't afford to live here. But that one might not scare you that much. That's okay because the house is actually not normally the biggest problem. Check this out. You ready? Number two, $50,000 in student loans. The average debt in America is $50,000 with interest. And you're going to have it when your kids start going to, it's just depressing. Okay, next. Ready? $29,000 in car loans. Higher interest rates. Even more so, maybe this is like, you're like, this is good news, or now you're like really feeling bad. I don't know where you are. Here's the last one. You ready? $16,000 in credit card debt. Collectively, across the United States, for those that have debt, we're looking at close to $100,000 just between student auto and credit before interest. That's a bad day, friends. That's a lot of money that you don't get to see every month because of credit card debt. Now, why are we talking about this? Here's why. Because I have never heard anyone say our debt makes our love life so much better. Like, my marriage is so much hotter because we have $16,000 in credit card debt. I mean, woo! You know, it gets us fired up, baby. No one ever says that. You know, I never heard anyone say, I used to be stressed out when I didn't have debt. But now that I have high interest rate loans, I sleep so much better at night. Says no one ever, right? No one's ever said every night, I thank God for my credit card debt, man. You know, used to, I really struggled with my relationship with God, but ever since I got into credit card debt, man, me and God are so close, so intimate. It's so awesome. Says no one ever. Actually, it might not be true. Maybe you're so stressed about your credit card debt that you are getting close to God, but that might be a different story, right? So we have this really, really big problem of financial stress in our culture, and part of it's how we're taught to live. And so the problem with this conversation is when we were in high school, there wasn't like a class that taught you how to budget well and to understand finances. And if you didn't have parents that could teach you well, or if your parents embraced the normal pattern of living in the United States, then you were taught how to manage money in a less than helpful way at times. And so this might be a normal thing for you. Now, listen, this is not a conversation to shame you. This is a conversation to set you free, okay? And I think God has something really, really big for us tonight. And so this is a hard conversation. It's kind of one of those weird things we don't like to talk about. And let me just acknowledge up front, like, everyone's made mistakes with money, right? Like, can we just say that out loud? Like, hey, everyone's made mistakes, and some people's might be bigger than others, but at the end of the day, man, we've all made mistakes with money. And one of the reasons that we don't like to talk about it is I think we get embarrassed. We get embarrassed because we don't understand certain things, or we get embarrassed when we're stuck, or we get embarrassed because we don't need help, or we don't want help, or we put ourselves into this position, and so therefore we don't want anybody else to have to carry that burden, or we don't want handouts, and all the different reasons that we kind of get weird about financial stress. And so to make you feel better, I'm going to share a poor decision that I made, just so we can all be on the same page, okay? And so I was like a teenager, and I got introduced to eBay. How many of you guys like the eBay, okay? Found out that it existed, and you know, you could kind of bid on stuff and get them for a little better price if you were intentional about it. And so I was, I don't know, 15, 16, something like that, and my parents gave me permission first to look, and then they actually let me start bidding on stuff, which I'm like, I don't know why they let me do that, but they did. And it was like, I mean, things that they knew I had the money for that I wanted, that I was looking for, right? So at the time, I wanted an iPod Color. They just come out, and you're like, oh man, like, you know, it's like the Game Boy all over again that came out. So the iPod Color, I remember I was sitting in class, the kid next to me had an iPod Color, and he was watching the new King Kong movie in color on his iPod in class, and I was like, oh, I gotta have one. Gotta have one. And so then I got stuck on it. I'm like, and I'm one of those guys that like just get stuck on stuff, and I like whatever it is that I want, that's what I want in the moment. I'm kind of impulsive in that, and so it could be big or little, whatever. And so I start looking on eBay, and I find these iPod Colors, and I found one for $200, and that was like a pretty good deal. I think they were like around $300, like brand new or something like that. And so I'm like, bam, $200. I'm gonna start the bid. And then like the next day I went back to check on the bid, and it started going up and going up and going up, and then it turns out I bid into different currency. And so $200 was actually $400 in American dollars. And I almost threw up. And then what happened is someone pushed it all the way to the bid limit, and I paid $400. And my parents made me pay it. And I hated that iPod with everything in me, and I've never gotten rid of it. Out of 100 things, I'm not getting rid of that because it was such a depressing win, okay? Why did that happen? I didn't know there was a lack of knowledge, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I made that mistake due to a lack of knowledge. I didn't know that there was an opportunity for other currency. I'm just looking at the numbers. I didn't know eBay had multiple currency exchanges. No one told me that. And so I made a poor decision because of a lack of knowledge. And a lot of us learn some of the things in life financially the hard way, don't we? And so what I hope is we can take a step back and maybe not learn so many things the hard way. So why are we talking about money in church? I want to address this up front because I met tons of people. Listen, I became a Christian at 15 or almost 16 years old and immediately started in learning about generosity, and it's motivated by the generosity of God. But I've heard tons of people say, man, I hate going to the church because all the church wants is your money. And I'm like, man, I've heard that a lot, and I want you to know it's not true for City Church at all. It's false, okay? We don't want your money. That's not what this conversation is about. This is about you being set free. Jesus doesn't just want us to be free spiritually. He wants us to be free materially as well, because it affects the way that we can live in this world to make a difference for him. And so, just in case you didn't know, some scholars will argue that Jesus talked more about money in the New Testament than any other one topic that he taught about. Over 25% of his teachings were about money or managing and stewards. And it's not, you're like, whoa, I thought Jesus was I thought he loved me. I didn't know he's after my wallet. Oh man, no, listen, Jesus is not after your wallet. He's after your heart. And he just knows how intimately these things are connected. And so he would not, say, hey, give your money to the church, give your money to the church. That's not what it was in the conversation. He would use money and tie it to a spiritual principle and help people connect the dots, because he knew how intimately the way that we live and our money and our finances and our possessions are connected to our heart. He said, where your money is, that's where your heart follows, where you invest in. And so I want you to know Jesus is not after your wallet today. He's after your heart. Okay? You can trust him. He's a good, good God. Now, Proverbs 22, here's our big core verse for today, okay? The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. This is why stress is bad, because the borrower is a slave to the lender, literally in bondage, right? Like if you have a car payment, you're stuck with that car payment, right? If you have credit card debt, you're stuck. You're in bondage. If you have student loans, you're stuck with those loans. And so we want to take this principle and remind ourselves, guys, the borrower is slave to the lender, and financial stress is bad, and people feel this. And we got college students in the room. We got people done with school who have student debt. Some of you might be debt-free. Awesome. Coach, the rest of us, man, we're all over the place when it comes to this conversation, but hopefully we can get on the same page. Here's what I want you to know. God wants something better for his kids than to always be in financial bondage. God wants something better for his kids than to always be in financial bondage and stress. There's more that God has for us. So imagine with me. Imagine a life debt-free. Just right now, just try to picture your life. Some of you are going to get out of college. Imagine life debt-free. What would it look like to be free from financial stress? Something breaks, and you just pay to get it fixed. Right? No, freaking out, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? No, you just pay to get it fixed because you have financial margin and you were expecting something like that to happen. Or a big purchase comes up and you just pay in cash. Dollar bills, y'all, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh man, just roll up, new refrigerator because I always kick the can, no problem, right? Someone ends up in need, and what happens? I can help. We can help, right? Like, what if you were in a place where you're like, oh man, like we can meet that need, right? Or like when it comes to vacation, what if your biggest problem on vacation was where to go, right? You're like, I got too many options because I can go here or there or this place or that place because I have financial margin and a plan. I don't know where you are. Maybe you're more spiritual than I am and you're not as motivated by like the practical stuff. If you're a follower of Jesus and you're motivated by the spiritual side, okay, I'm motivated by it a little bit, okay? But Jesus said, if you're faithful with a little, I'm going to trust you with more. Over and over again. If you're faithful with a little, I'll trust you with more. If you can manage what I've given you, and you use it well to make a difference in and around you, I'll give you more to do the same. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, we recognize that when we live with integrity, when we learn to be good managers of what God has trusted us with, that's actually a way that we worship God. Like we honor him, like he's pleased, and we're able to make a big deal about God. One of the reasons, one of our values is radical generosity is because we recognize we're managers, not owners. And so when we are able to use what God has given us well, our time, our energy, our resources, all of it, and make a difference in the world around us and use it well, not only does God increase our capacity to keep doing that in the lives of others, but then others look at that kind of living in radical generosity and say, why? What's wrong with you? Why are you so generous? We can say, because God is so generous. It's motivated by his love. And so here's what I'm going to do. 3 prayers for the pursuit of a debt-free life today, okay? 3 prayers that you can use this week for pursuing a debt-free life. You ready? Say yes if you're ready. Yes. All right, woo! So excited! We love talking about debt. It's the best. Okay, prayer number 1, you ready? God, give me self-control. Say, give me self-control. Okay, now I want you to try it again and say it with a smile like you actually believe it. God, give me self-control. All right. God, give me self-control. Proverbs 25:28. Here's where we're resting, okay? A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. Why is it every Bible verse points me back to the Lord of the Rings? Why does that happen all the time? It's all I can see is like some city torn apart by Gandalf and his crew, right? A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. What does that mean? It means you're vulnerable. You're at risk. A person without self-control is vulnerable to the financial pressures and the terrible advice of the Western culture around us. Here's the deal. Every single one of you have this little 2-year-old living inside of you, okay? And this is the little 2-year-old in Walmart that throws a huge fit when it doesn't get what it wants, right? And all of our 2-year-olds act a little differently, but at the end of the day, all of our 2-year-olds end up throwing fits, don't they? Right? You know what I'm talking about? Like you got that 2-year-old inside of you when something's not going your way and you want to go buy something, had a hard day and I deserve this, and you have these little tantrums and fits inside of you. Here's what you need to do is get the wall back up. Because you're vulnerable. Put that kid in a Harry Potter closet and don't let him back out, okay? Right? Get the 2-year-old under control. Let me give you some examples of what this looks like. Some of you are small spenders, right? Like you don't like just spend it all at once. You're small spenders, and so you like to like shop the clearance rack, right? So you like to tell everybody about all the good deals you get on the clearance rack. But the problem is, you visit the clearance rack so often that you're like, oh, look how much money I saved. You're like, did you? Because you wouldn't have spent that money if it wasn't on clearance in the first place, right? What happens is some of us are small spenders and we like sink the ship slowly. It's like, oh, nickel and dime here, nickel and dime here, nickel and dime. I got a deal. And you're like, did you need it? Just because it's on clearance doesn't mean it was something you needed. Some of you are big spenders, right? You don't like sink the ship slowly, you just blow it up all at once. You know what I'm talking about? Like, hey, I moved to the mountains and I bought a Jeep and I went to REI and I got an REI credit card and I maxed it out with all my camping gear and I bought an annual ski pass and we're going to the mountains and I might go to the jail at the end of the year, but you know what? We're going to have fun because I live in the mountains, and you just blow the boat up all at once. Some of you are impulse buyers, right? And so you don't have this nuke that you're ready to drop and you don't just nickel and dime it. It's just like if you want something in a moment, you just like get fixated on it and you can't get off of it. I don't know where you are, but Jesus told us last week that our life doesn't consist in the abundance of our stuff. And we said we know that, but then somehow we get stuck in this conversation. What do we need? God, give me self-control. God, give me self-control. Less of what doesn't matter so I can focus on more of what does. What are we doing? You can write this down. This will be really helpful. We're going to learn to say no for a little while so that we can say yes for the rest of our lives. The principle of self-control is I'm going to learn to say no for a little while so I can say yes for the rest of my life. Here's what that looks like. All right, so let's say some of you like to get your nails did, okay? A little bit of bling bling and a little cutesy awesomeness, and nails are not cheap, by the way, and what's really frustrating is when they're not cheap and they still don't do a good job. You know what I'm saying? Like, not that I would know what that's like, but well, let's be honest. If you're a lady in the room and you like to get your nails done, you don't do it for other guys, right? You do it for other girls. Right? Have you ever heard a guy say, "Woo! Did you see the nails on that, babe? Oh my goodness, I gotta get me some of those nails." You ever heard a guy talk like that? Like, "Oh, hey, do you think they're real? Or are they fake?" What do you I'm not allowed to say that. That's funny. That is funny. Right, what happens? We do our nails because of different reasons, and they're $40 here, $30 here, and we get stuck in this you have different motivations for your nails. It's fine. Maybe you have the $5 coffee here and there and here and there and here and there. Or if you're Capital One member, it's $2.50. In case you're wondering, okay. Maybe you have hobbies, right, that sink the ship a little bit. You got golf, or you like to do different things. Maybe it's recreation and buying more gear to go hit the slopes or go hiking, or whatever it is. Maybe it's eating out for you, right? Maybe that's where you start to sink the ship. Is, hey, we deserve to go out to dinner now. We're going to go this place, and we're going to get extra margs tonight. Or maybe it's a new car. Listen, oh man, I can't tell you how many friends that I watch on like Instagram and Facebook, and life starts to get hard, and I know their story, and their life is falling apart. And you know what they do? They go buy a new car. I'm like, what? Why did you do that? That's a terrible idea. I know you can't afford that car. They're like, woo, look at my new car. I'm like, yeah, that's a really bad idea for a single mom. Oh, don't do that, right? And it's this impulse like, oh, okay, all right. So I don't know what it is for you. What we're going to talk about at the end is this guy named Dave Ramsey, okay? And he's a financial advisor, super awesome guru. I'll give you some tools at the end. But here's how he says it. He says, if we will live like no one else, then later you can live like no one else. If right now you will live like no one else, then later you can live like no one else. So let me give you my personal story just to add a layer to this. God, give me self-control. Okay, so thanks to my parents, who genuinely taught me well about money. But then also when Danielle and I first got married, we went through this class called Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey, and it was like mind-blowing, guys. Like brandly new, married, like getting done with college, and listen, between my parents and the Bible and Dave Ramsey, okay, Danielle and I were able to graduate college debt-free, 3 degrees, completely debt-free. And listen, the whole time we're giving 10% of our income to the church. The whole time we're working. It doesn't mean it was easy. Like some of it was like crazy God stuff, right? Like we were trusting God to provide, and He did. Other parts of it was like we were working our tails off. And like at one point, I'm pretty sure Danielle had to go to school like 2 extra years, like longer, because when we did our budget, we're like, okay, we can afford to pay for 12 credit hours this semester. That's it. Now, if she could have done 18 and 18, she could have graduated a year early, and that would have been great, but we couldn't afford it, and we wanted to graduate debt-free, and so we made some pretty big sacrifices on the front end, and because of that advice, and because of Dave Ramsey, my parents, I've never had a car payment. We've never had a car payment. We've always paid cash for whatever it was. And listen, we drove some like junky, janky stuff. Like I remember we bought this Mazda for $1,000. I think her car got rear-ended, and it was worth like $500, right? And so then we got the cash from that. We found this Mazda, and it was like leaking oil, and it wasn't running, and it was just an okay car. And so me and my dad went and picked it up on a trailer, brought it back, got it running, it was fine, and it leaked oil just enough that you had to keep tabs on it and like put oil back in it. But we drove that thing for like a while. I think we sold it for like $1,200. We're like, woohoo! And then we were able to put it into a different car, and we've never had a car payment because of the wisdom of my parents, Dave Ramsey, to not be in debt and to be a hostage, if you will. Now here's why this matters. God was teaching me on the front end to be a good steward with what we had, and I'm really grateful for the people around us that helped us do it. But when God called us to Boulder, we were able to move to Boulder debt-free. We didn't owe anything. And to be honest, if God had called us and we weren't debt-free, I don't know that we would have been able to do it and survive here because of how expensive it is. And so it's amazing looking back on how God was letting us learn self-control on the front end. And guys, like it was crazy. We did some crazy stuff. Like we couldn't do Christmas presents here, and we had a eating out budget of like $80 a month for the two of us, and we had pretty strict things so that we could have self-control on the front end and live like no one else, so that later we could live like no one else. And so what we're saying, God, give me self-control. What is that for you? The second thing we're asking God to help us with is, God, give me understanding. God, give me understanding. James 1:5 says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. That word reproach means without shame. But you can ask God for help. You can ask God for wisdom. Wisdom is the application of knowledge, which is what we're talking about. God, give me understanding. And God's not going to look at you and say, well, you're an idiot and I'm not going to help. He says, I'm glad. I love to help my kids. He's a good dad who loves us, much like my parents were. And I'm really grateful for that. And so here's what happens. In the conversations, when we're looking at financial conversations in the world around us, typically the questions that people ask is how much down and how much a month, right? How much down, how much a month? And then what do we do? We make decisions about financial things we're going to buy based on, can I afford the payments, right? Here's the problem with that logic, is that we end up paying long-term way more than we would have if we were better stewards and understood. The reason a lot of us get stuck in this is, listen, I have friends who say, you're just always going to have a car payment. Their parents taught them that that's just how life is. And I'm here to say, listen, it's not how it has to be. There's a way to leverage our life so we can be a bigger blessing to others on the other side if we'll learn to manage what we have well now. God, give me understanding. And so again, sometimes we get desperate, right? Like we get in a tight spot, and so we don't know what to do, and so then we just throw down a bunch of money and get a new car payment right off the lot. And let me just run some numbers for you, okay? So we said earlier, the average debt in America is roughly $16,000, right, on credit card. So let me just run some numbers for you just to give you the big picture of like how compound interest works, okay? So this is crazy. I'm not a financial advisor, by the way, okay? This is not my job, and don't try to sue me for anything that I say. But I'm trying to help us have some practical thoughts when it comes to stewarding what God has for us. And so let me give you an example. Let's say today you owe $16,000 on credit card debt. At the average is 19% interest right now in America, a little over 19%. So let's say you owe, just round the number, $16,000 at 19%. And let's say you pay the minimum payment, $250 a month. Okay, ready for this? If you owe $16,000 in credit card debt and you pay $250 a month, it's going to take you 40 years to pay off that $16,000 credit card bill. And you will end up paying $105,000 in interest over 40 years. Now listen, I don't know if you were good in math and algebra when you were in high school, but those are not good numbers. $16,000 over the 40-year period of paying it off ends up being $105,000 in interest. Now let's reverse it. Let's say you were able to take some of these principles, get serious about how you're managing your stuff, and you actually end up with $16,000 in cash sitting in your bank account. Woo! Don't buy a car, right? Wait, pause. Wait, I got $16,000. What am I going to do with it? Let's say you invest it in like a Roth IRA or something. The average rate right now in America, like generous, is 6%, okay? So let's say today you take $16,000, put it in an investment account at 6% over 40 years. If you never touch that money again, today with $16,000, in 40 years, that $16,000 will grow to $160,000 on its own. That's your money making money, baby. Like that's good news. You're like, whoa. Okay, so back up. Let's say you had $16,000 and you didn't have a credit card payment, and so you were able to put $250 on top of that $16,000 every month. If you invested $250 for 40 years on top of that $60,000, at the end of 40 years, you would have $640,000. Guys, where's that money, right? Like, holy cow, like, these are huge numbers. You say, God, give me understanding. And listen, I'm going to tell you about it. You can circle it right now on your connection card. The letter F stands for Financial Peace University. I'm not signing you up for a class. I'm not doing any of that. If you want to know more, if we can resource you in any way, we're talking send you an Excel sheet through email and a budget tool, give you a book, point you to his website. All of this is there to help you take some next steps. God, give me understanding. Help me to understand this. Don't be ashamed about it. There's always room for progress, okay? The last thing we're going to look at. God, give me a plan. Everybody say, God, give me a plan. I need a plan, right? If I have understanding, that's great, but I need a plan because the little 2-year-old inside of me is still trying to get out. Proverbs 21:5 says this: good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. In case you were wondering, the book of Proverbs is just practical wisdom, okay? And so that's why we're dealing with it and wrestling through it. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. That word haste in the Hebrew literally means I felt sad and I bought something. Not really, that was a joke. You could laugh. That's funny. Okay, but really, right, when we make hasty decisions, impulse decisions, we get ourselves in trouble. Listen, no plan leads to poverty. You can stumble into debt is the point here, but you can never stumble out of it. Does this make sense? You can accidentally make some poor decisions and get yourself into a hole with the 3 different shovels of student loans and credit card debt and cars, and you can dig a hole, but you cannot accidentally wander back out of that hole. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. Now, listen, this conversation that we're having, you say, man, why are we talking about this in church? Because this is a spiritual discipline with our material possessions. It's really, really hard because it gets all tangled up in here. And we also, maybe if we lack understanding, we get stuck, and then we never know how to get out of that cycle. And then we get in a positions like, man, I wish I could help that person. I wish I could do more. I wish I had more flexibility. I wish this. I wish that. Because we are slaves to the lender. We're held hostage to the debt that we find ourselves in. And so Dave Ramsey, listen, he gives some really helpful steps. He has like 7 baby steps, he calls them. And he doesn't blow you away with like talking over your head. He's right in your face, and he says, listen, let's just back up. Number 1, get an emergency fund. Like $1,000 in the bank in case something crazy happens. Put away $1,000. Just start there. Don't do anything else. Just get $1,000 in the bank. That way, man, if your kid falls and breaks his arm or your radiator explodes, you have the ability to take care of it, and you're not in a pickle. Then he's going to help you pay off debt. He gives you tools to pay off debt based on its size. He calls it the debt snowball and a bunch of other really cool things. And it's really great. Listen, I'm not a financial investor. That's not the goal here. What I'm trying to raise is the awareness that when we allow ourselves to be slaves to the lender, we are actually limiting our capacity to be used by God in the world around us, because we are tied and in bondage. And so how do we honor God with a plan? Let me tell you one more story as we close out. Daniel and Michelle. Daniel is our worship arts director, and Michelle is our director of operations, and she's in kids, I think. And man, they're 2 of our staff team, and they're awesome people. I remember when they first got married, I think we took Financial Peace University together. I think we went through this class together, and they got really serious about their finances. They were part of this CARES thing with apartments, and so like half their rent was covered, and they were able to really start getting serious about like budgeting. And they were in this like little janky apartment, and it wasn't that janky, but it was not great. Like it was just an apartment, I guess. And so they were saving money and trying to get serious about being good stewards as a young married couple without kids. And pretty soon, man, I don't know how far into it, I don't remember the timeline, but at one point pretty early on, like they were a young couple, like 24, 25 probably, where they started opening up their home to foster care. And like that was a big deal. They got out of an apartment, bought a house, started to renovate it, and they had to meet tons of criteria just to be able to let their home be somewhere safe to foster. And so I remember them going through all of this and putting the resources and really budgeting well and doing all this. And they had a total of 5 different kids that they fostered during a period of time. And it was awesome to watch them like just love these kids and try to engage and be available, even if it didn't mean they get to keep the kid, and watch their hearts get ripped out in the process, but knowing that it was really good for the kid in the meantime. And they ended up being able to adopt 2 of the 5 kids that they were able to foster. And they're in the back right now. Their names are Abigail and Addison. And I remember watching them make all these decisions, and the whole time they were really serious about managing what they had well so they could do this well, because things were tight, and they worked for a church. Their salary wasn't huge. I mean things were tight. And on top of that, I watched them embrace these principles, and then it just so happens that one day God calls them to Boulder. Guys, listen, this is crazy, okay? Because they've embraced the idea of stress is bad, because they embraced good stewardship on the front end, when God called them to Boulder a year and a half ago almost, they had 0 debt. And they packed up their family, they took serious pay cuts, and they moved to Boulder, sold their house, did it all because, now listen, had they not been debt-free, I don't think they could have made the move. In the same way, I just don't think they could have been able to afford the transition. But because they were good managers on the front end, Jesus said, hey, if I can trust you with a little bit here, that just tells me I can trust you with more here, and more here, and more here. And if I can trust you with little kids here, I can trust you with more. If I can trust you with the way you steward things here, right? You see how this works? It's amazing to watch them. God, give me a plan. God, give me a plan. And without a plan, man, listen, it's not going to happen. And so circle the letter F if you're interested. Listen, we're just going to shoot you an email. You're not obligated to anything, but if we can give you tools, listen, our desire is for you to be free from bondage so that you're able to make a difference in the world around you. I think God has more for his kids than living the rest of our lives in bondage and financial stress. This is a weird conversation, but I think it's really helpful. So, you say, why are we motivated to have this conversation? As followers of Jesus in the room, hear me out. We're faithful to God because he's first faithful to us. We love God only because he loved us. We're not doing this to try to earn God's good graces. He loved us so incredibly that we simply start to love him back. He gave his son so we could be made right with him. And so the only reasonable response is that we give our entire lives back to him because we're so grateful for his love. It's so overwhelming. It's so amazing. And I trust him fully because he's a good dad who loves us, and he's already proved that love. Listen, God has given you gifts. He's given you income. He's given you resources. He's given you time. He's given you the emotional capacity to be involved in the lives around you. And here's what's really big. The Bible teaches that those gifts are not ours. They're given from him to us. They're gifts. And so as a result, it's our job to honor him by being faithful with what he's given us. God, thank you so much for my home. I'm going to use it for you. Thank you so much for my time. I'm going to use it for you. Thank you so much for my job. I'm going to use it for you. Thank you so much for my energy and my resources and my talents and my gifts. I'm going to use it for you because you're so good, and I trust that you could use it better than I could ever on my own. And listen, if you've messed some of this up before, welcome to the club. That's the amazing thing about our God. Is no matter what kind of mess we find ourselves in or how good we think we are, there's always room to move forward. Because nothing we do earns a right relationship with him. He paid for it all, and we simply receive it. So don't be discouraged. Don't be scared. Don't feel stuck, because I'm telling you, God not only wants you to be free, but he surrounds you with community that's going to help you be. And the only reason, listen, I told you my story is not to brag, because I think it is a miracle of God that I'm standing here today debt-free. It's unbelievable. I got 1,000 stories of God's supernatural provision for my family. Just as Jesus sets us free spiritually when we ask him to save us, he can set us free materially as well. And so again, what are we asking? God, give me self-control. Maybe that's for you. Man, it is for me. I remember Dave Ramsey kicking me in the teeth, and I'm trying to get this under control. And it was so on me. I'm sitting in a Starbucks parking lot with my $4.50 coffee because I bought a grande instead of a venti because I was trying to be a good steward. And it was all over me that I impulse bought. I deserve this because I've been working hard and blah, 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 blah. And it was wrecking me. This is so weird, okay? I opened the cup. I dumped it out in the parking lot. And I said, all right, God, you win. Because this was something we do it all the time, right? Like, all right, God, I just deserve this. I deserve this. I deserve this. God, give me self-control. It was in that moment. I got a few sips in, by the way, okay? It wasn't like total waste. I dumped it out in the parking lot. I said, all right, God, we're going to get a plan. I'm gonna quit letting the 2-year-old win inside of me. God, give me a plan. God, give me self-control. God, give me understanding. Right? Maybe for you, maybe it's just educating yourself. Maybe it's genuinely taking the resources, Financial Peace University, getting educated, gaining understanding so you can steward what God has given you well. You don't have to be stuck. There's a plan no matter what you are on your financial spectrum. No matter if you're up to your eyeballs in debt or if you're just barely there, there's a plan for you. At this time, we have the chance to honor God with what we have. Because less is more and stress is bad. We're going to find that giving is good and tomorrow matters. We have the opportunity to leverage right now to make a difference in the world around us. So I don't know where you are, but I imagine there's change that needs to happen somewhere. I want you to know. I was up till 1 a.m. last night working on our budget. Because there's always room for improvement, okay? And so I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to close out our service. Will you bow your heads with me? As you bow your heads and close your eyes, I'm going to invite the band to come. And as the band comes and prepares, I just want you to reflect in your own heart and mind on what God might be doing. And maybe just in your seat right now, you'd pray in the silence in your own heart and mind and say, God, I need some self-control. And maybe God's put some things on your radar right now that you can begin to adjust and cut back. Say, God, I want to live like no one else right now so I can live like no one else later. I'm not going to get my nails done right now, and then later I'm going to buy nail party for my entire city group because of how you're letting me steward what you're doing. Maybe you need a plan. Maybe God's telling you to get into an FPU class online or pick up the book or whatever you got to do just to learn more. And maybe through your city group, man, you just need some accountability. Maybe you need to find someone there. And God's just saying, hey, get some people around you who are going to help you. And no matter where you are, I just want you to reflect for a moment on what God might be doing. And would you just take a moment and respond to him? Get an action plan this week. As you're reflecting, I just want to take a moment and if you're not a follower of Jesus, I just want to share with you this. This conversation, debt's bad, right? But there's another debt that's even worse than financial debt. And that's our spiritual debt. And the only reason we're having a conversation about living free materially is because Jesus has first set us free spiritually, and that's the love of God that motivates us to live in a certain way. Because maybe you didn't know this, but because of the way that we live, because of our sin, because of our pride, because of our brokenness, we have a spiritual debt that you and I can't pay. And that's why the story of Jesus is so amazing, because God sent Jesus to pay our spiritual debt. Our God gave his son. He gave his son in our place for our sins. He was murdered on a cross. 3 days later, he rose again. He paid the payment for our debt, wiped it clean so we can be set free spiritually. And I want you to know, friends, sitting in the room, if you have never asked Jesus to save you, when you ask Jesus to forgive your debt, when you ask him to make you new, he meets you in that place of faith, in that moment, and he saves you and sets you free. He makes you completely alive and new spiritually. And if you have never crossed the line of faith, you've never taken a moment and said, Jesus, I believe in you. I want you to save me. I want to follow you. I want you to know in the privacy of your own heart and mind right now, you can pray that prayer. Jesus, I give you my life, and I want to follow you. And he'll meet you in this space, and he'll make you completely new. God, I'm so grateful for our friends. I'm so grateful for our church. I'm grateful that we get to reflect on your love and are motivated by it to make a difference in our world. And I'm grateful that we're able to position our hearts to manage what we have better. None of us likes to be stressed, and we all want to be able to do more in the world around us. And so I pray you help us to be better managers of what you've given us. You are so radically generous, and we want to be able to demonstrate the same. Thank you for incredible people who carry that heart. Man, I know in the rooms already, so many people demonstrate this so well already. Man, and I pray that they're encouraged that you're a good dad who wants to help them live a life set free from financial stress and set free to live and love others in a way that only we can through your power and your love. It's in Jesus' name, amen.